Hey y'all, 2017, and just a little while ago, I was wilding out on the internet, alright? Couldn't get my thoughts together in regards to the title of this live stream. What's going on right now? My blood began to boil over. I needed a breather, alright? Needed to relax. Thing is, what we had to discuss today is kind of serious. Alright, so I brought it to the live stream of the dang internet. Alright, see what y'all had to say about this subject. Alright, first of all, if you do happen to be on the internet watching live streams at 4:43 in the evening on a Friday evening, God bless you. Thank you for joining me. Alright, we're going to try and keep it cool. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, at the end of this broadcast, what I got to mention to you right now is that we're going to stand back and we're going to ask ourselves, is this person or not a pedophile? Should he be investigated for pedophilia? Because there's a lot of red flags, alright? And here's the thing about it. A lot of times people find out after the fact about a person, such as a Catholic priest. They find out after the fact that his unusual behavior were red flags to something else, right? And that's sincerely what we're going to ask ourselves by the end of this here broadcast. All right, thank you for me. I'll keep an eye on the chat history. If people are up in there and stuff, I'll see if I can keep an eye on it and shout holler at me and stuff on the chat history, stuff like that. But we're going to dive into it. There's an article I want to share with y'all. I don't know if I can get a picture of the article. Alright. Meet the Catholic priest whose Twitter, I don't know if you can read it, whose Twitter put Trump to shame, alright? We're going to dive down this rabbit hole, alright, once we get situated. Alright, and I'll reiterate the headline, and this is kind of an old article. It's written in April 14th. 2017 by a Mike Hogan, right, for Vanity Fair. All right, that's who employs him. The headline reads, "Meet the Catholic priest whose Twitter puts Trump to shame." And I heard about it, but there was a Catholic priest out there. His Twitter put Trump to shame. That's the headline. We're about to read through this article. We're going to go ahead and see just what kind of wisdom Mike Hogan has to impart on us now. The sub-headline reads this. On his actions, Reverend James Martin, let's remember that name. That's who we're talking about, all right? Reverend James Martin, SJ, and I don't know what that stands for. All right, SJ preaches that Jesus disapproves of the Muslim ban. All right, comma, Ken Wall, comma, and the United's decision to doctor off the plane. I don't know if anybody out there remembers, but United Airlines, they roughed up some sort of doctor, and the whole situation was bizarre. The whole situation was bizarre and unnecessary. And who even really cared about it? All right, but he was making reference to a current event that was happening that nobody really cared about. Alright, but let's just discuss that real quick. Before we dive into the article, I want to discuss that with y'all real quick. Apparently, Martin S.J. preaches that Jesus disapproves of the Muslim ban. Now, first of all, there is no such thing as a Muslim ban happening here, alright? And what was, we know what to do with here, but most places in the world do. In the United States. So when Reverend, who's the Reverend in question today, that's the Reverend looking mad suspicious. He says that Jesus disapproves of the Muslim ban, which for one doesn't exist, right? For number two, what I had to point out is Jesus himself, basically he was the personification of a Muslim ban. Alright, so understand what this guy's trying to tell you, what this Reverend is trying to tell you, what Mike Hogan's trying to tell you is that Jesus, he would very much disapprove of a Muslim ban, even though Jesus himself is a Muslim ban, all right? As though he disapproves of himself or something like that. It's backwards logic, all right? And that's what I wanted to point out, is this whole situation is going to be filled up to him, all right, to the very dramatic Catholic priests and all the people who like him, all right? So Jesus apparently would disapprove against him. That does not exist, even though he is a Muslim ban. He would also disapprove of the Mexican Wall. Jesus would also, according to James Martin, Reverend James Martin, Jesus would disapprove of the Mexican Wall. Thing is, Mexico is absolutely not around. I don't have any idea how Jesus would know at all about Mexico. There was no Mexico. And the situations do change sometimes. Meanwhile, there's a big old humongous wall in the Vatican that everybody knows about, and around Israel, and all sort of and stuff like that. Like, see, it's absolutely backwards logic. That's what I'm trying to point out. You start to wonder about these reverends, these men of faith out here, and you start to wonder how they can do morning and leave out the front door, how they find the front door, type stuff. To use that dirty kid. And it's usually like a socialist agenda, you'll know. And everybody's, I mean, this is common knowledge at this point. A lot of these Catholic priests out here have immigration, even though they don't have immigration over there at the Vatican. It's pro-refugee and stuff. It's pro-carbon taxes and stuff. You pay. It's accepting all sort of constituencies. It really doesn't matter what these. It's all completely backwards. But at the same time, you're going to have people in the mix. I have Catholic priests out here. And I've noted in a video that I haven't uploaded yet of a reverend named Pedos who actually is not a pedophile and stuff. And he actually just got excommunicated from his church recently. But that's in another video, all right? There's good people in the Catholic Church is what I'm trying to tell you. There's all sort of good people in it, all right? And there's place. And it's becoming very apparent to everybody that a lot of these people are definitely all the way mixed up with this pedophilia business, right? I'm talking about the tip top of the Vatican down to the very lowest levels of the Vatican, your local representatives from the Catholic Church, you know what I'm saying? It's a good idea to keep an eye on all of them because they all seem to want to walk around in this so-called celibacy, and they all seem to want to walk around in robes in a weird kind of ways, touch our children and stuff, and they don't have wives and stuff, and it's all very suspicious. Alright? So we need to start figuring out, okay, well, pedophilia has been going on, you understand? Not everybody has been implicated. Well, how do we find them? How do we find the pedophiles and stuff? Thing is, in the era of Donald Trump, love him or hate him, pedophiles will find you. And that's why we're even going over this article, because this guy, he's going, it's just Google image, Reverend James Martin. Tell me what he looks like. All right, we're going to start reading through the article, seeing just what he espouses. Like I said, it's all completely backwards. It's completely and totally hypocritical if you are going to be a Catholic priest or purport to have any sort of investment in the Bible or Jesus at all. Well, you wouldn't really be thinking this way for any sort of reason. In fact, this line of reasoning would be quite suicidal, all right, that we're going to explain. And we're going to see if we can't run through this whole article, all right? So it's story time. Story time, you guys. Let's see, I'm going to push that button. Sorry about pushing that button. I know it makes a lot of noise. All right. We're going to read out this article by Mike Hogan regarding this Catholic priest by the name of Reverend James Martin. All right, Donald Trump's presidency has put a lot of liberals in an apocalyptic mood. And Reverend James Martin is here to help, apparently, according to Vanity Fair. All right. At a time when the term conservative Christian feels increasingly redundant, it does, doesn't it? The New York City-based Jesuit priest, he's got a Twitter and a Facebook account, all right, and it offers a refreshingly progressive, if scrumptuously Catholic perspective. I don't know what that means. Scrupulously Catholic perspective. I'm not about to sing the of Roe versus Wade, and he's talking about all sort of not even very interesting. All right. So the article reads, Martin is perfectly willing to slam Gitmo and all sort of other stuff. Like he thinks he's a political revolutionary, something like that, through his Twitter. And a lot of people think that they are through their Twitter. Reverend James Martin, that's how he thinks. Let's see if we could just skip past the boring parts. All right. Anyways, to skip past that, it says, little wonder then that he's picked up over 100,000 followers. All right, this is a Catholic priest somewhere by the name of Reverend James Martin. He's got 100,000 followers there on the Twitter, and 500,000 on his Facebook. Congratulations, Reverend James Martin. He says my social media strategy has changed not a bit. He says it's the world that's turned. I think it makes me, what I'm saying, seem more radical, but it's always been the same message. All right, and so we're gonna dive down deep into what it is. What is this message? But besides hating Donald Trump, which we're gonna find out, of course he does. What is his particular message? What's making him seem very radical? All right, let's go. Let's read a little bit further. It says that message aligns very closely with the one espoused by his fellow social media savvy Jesuit Pope Francis. All right, and understand this is all out in the open, by the way. It's all out in the open that Reverend James Martin is a Jesuit. It's all out in the open that Pope Francis also is a Jesuit. It's not clear to a lot of people that that's actually illegal. That's pretty much, that's against the rules. Shouldn't be a Jesuit pope. However, there is a whole bunch of blackmail and scandal led up to that, by the way. All right, so you gotta see. I want to point this out. Pope Francis is a social media savvy Jesuit priest. All right, think about how old this man is. Right, how many people you know who's that old has any gosh dang clue over what's savvy in the media? Like, media savvy, like, they don't know anything about that sort of thing. Isn't that weird? Isn't that curious? All right, the Pope, for some reason, he operates over the Twitter, man. That's his tool of choice, the Twitter. And so is Reverend James Martin, all right? He's all over the Twitter. He's got 100,000 followers or whatever. All right, anyways, let's read a little bit further. Shoot. He says, I am really on board with the way he's proceeding and what he's focusing on, Martin says about Pope Francis. He's really on board with it, with all this backwards ideology and stuff. He's really on board with Pope Francis when he's talking about carbon taxes and people got to pay more money and stuff like that. He's really on board with the LGBTQ and whatever else that they want to add. He's really on board with stuff like that, like where people need to take in refugees in our countries, but not in the Vatican. No, not in the Vatican, not at all. He's really on board with that sort of thing, that whole socialist, but from behind closed walls type deal. He's really on board with that. He says he likes fantastic, all right? And then, you know what I'm saying, as you can imagine, and the article shows, all right, James Martin, you know what I'm saying, he's all over his Twitter, all right? He's basically all on Donald Trump's balls, all right? All over him, all right? And on his Twitter, that's how he's finding all these followers, simply by following Donald Trump's Twitter and stuff. And of course, he's getting all these followers, people who hate Donald Trump, all right? So he's getting all the popularity. Anyways, Martin, who serves as an editor-at-large for a Jesuit-run America magazine. I mean, how ominous can that be? And recently authored a book advocating better Catholic LGBT relations. See, that's the thing about it. What you have to acknowledge is everything what I'm describing to you. If you like that sort of stuff, or if you don't care, if you're indifferent to that sort of stuff, really doesn't matter. However, if you're a Catholic priest, you're purporting to have some sort of moral authority and stuff like that. You can't just be taking all these backwards ideologies to heart and stuff. It has nothing to do with Jesus or the Bible and stuff like that. And so it's like what they're doing is they're exposing everything about themselves that's absolutely ass backwards. They can't help but do it because they hate Donald Trump so much. Why? I don't know why, but Donald Trump hates pedophiles. So I'll let you figure that one out. All right. Vanity Fair. We're gonna continue. Vanity Fair starts asking this reverent questions, and in the midst of this interviewer, Mark Hogan or whatever his name was, asking questions, what I gotta explain to you is this: Reverend James Martin's gonna go ahead and implicate himself all over the place just the way in which we thought he would. He's going to espouse all the kind of different ideological, political stances that he has, and he's going to make it abundantly clear that he needs to be investigated. Why? Because at the bottom of all of this rabbit hole of ass backward thinking is pedophilia. It's all sort of satanic worship, dude, and I'm tired of it. I'm sure y'all are tired of it. It's going to be pedophilia every time when you dig into this sort of stuff, all right? So we're just going to hop on into it. This is an interview. It takes place, all right? Mark Hogan or whatever the heck his name was, he's going to be asking Reverend James Martin some questions, some real hot questions and stuff, what the people want to know. All right, here it goes. Mark Hogan says, those of us in the media joke about hot takes. All right, that's some sort of media terminology. He says, where you weigh in quickly on the topic, and that's something that I do, I guess, I didn't know there's a term for it. It's called hot takes, where you weigh in quickly on a topic that everybody's talking about, all right? But you do a legitimately good job of that, Reverend. He says, what's your approach on covering the news, all right? As far as these hot topics, I gotta say that they are yourself. But as long as you're willing to admit later on that you made an ass out of yourself, I think everything is good. It's kind of good to get on breaking news and urgent news and stuff like that. I agree with all that sort of stuff. But they asked him a question and said, what's your approach, Reverend Martin, on covering the news? And Reverend James Martin, he said, people are naturally for a moral perspective, all right? And so they come to Reverend James Martin in his damn robes and stuff, right? He said that's their conscience desiring some kind of moral compass, and they get it from me. I'm Reverend James Martin. I'm their moral compass, all right? He says the Gospels are always relevant, and Jesus' way of looking at something is my way of looking at something. Whoa! It's a very interesting way to put it. Now, I'll tell you that this is Reverend James Martin's actual words that he wrote down. This is a quote from Reverend James Martin. He just said that Jesus' way of looking at something, and this is his exact words, is my way of looking at something. Is it? Is that so, Reverend James Martin? Because here's the thing about it. You might want to strive, all right, to have the perspective of Jesus. That's what all Christians purport to do, is strive to have that perspective. He's not agreeing with you. It sounds very narcissistic when you say, oh, the way that Jesus thinks about that is the way that I do. Jesus agrees with me and stuff, and so that's why Jesus is so important, because he agrees with me. That's the kind of terminology that will be used by these kind of suspected pedophiles, all right, in question. And meanwhile, he's just going to go ahead and hang himself even further. Let's take a look. There are some questions that cry out so much for a Christian perspective that to find them, they take off on social media. That's a retarded thing to say, isn't it? All right? Because that's what people should definitely be rushing to, social media, in order to find out what is the best Christian way to live. All right? They go to Reverend James Martin. They find out what's the best way to live on his Twitter, right? Then the Vanity Fair, Mark Hoagland or whatever, he says, but there are different ways of looking at Gospels. How would you describe the Jesuit perspective specifically? Because it is a sect of different kind of way of thinking, the Jesuit perspective. He asked, man, How would you describe the Jesuit perspective specifically? And then Reverend James Martin says this. He says that Jesus' message is essentially one of love, mercy, and forgiveness, and that his approach was radical inclusion. And we're going to stop right there. All right, hold on. All right, Reverend James Martin, he says, okay, here's the only thing you need to know. All Jesus was about, I'm going to sum them up in 3 words: love, mercy, and forgiveness. You want to know what kind of atmosphere that will breed? Yeah, pedophile atmosphere, all right, because you didn't mention nothing about justice at all. And it seems to me that Jesus was kind of infatuated with justice. You didn't mention anything about that. And you didn't say nothing about that. Instead, you just said love, mercy, and forgiveness. All over the place. It's interesting that you say that, Reverend James Martin, that those are the only things that we should really think about. And then, then this, he had what was called a radical up out of the Bible and stuff. Right? Radical inclusion, probably an accurate term for Jesus. All right, complete, utter, and total retard. He goes on and he says he was in particular concerned with the marginalized, which is why I'm concerned with marginalized. Now, I want to let you know that actually is very much code, because like I said, what Reverend James Martin is implicating is some sort of pedophilia. All right. So when he speaks about the marginalized, what he's referring to, the people he's referring to, are pedophiles. All right. And I know it sounds insidious, and it's like, oh, how could you accuse me? You know what? I put everything I love on it. All right. That's the marginalized people that he's talking about right now. The people that accept all sort of people. You guys, all sort of people, even the marginalized. You know, those marginalized people in the Vatican, who might, their love might look a little bit different. You know, you guys, they're marginalized. All right. We need to love on them, according to Martin. All right. So, next question: you find that people are more receptive to your social media ministry than they were when Trump was elected? And I thought that was a very interesting question. All right, very interesting, an appropriate question, because you got to understand, with this preacher's Twitter account, it blew up. He started saying stuff about Donald Trump. Ergo, he's writing Donald Trump's bowels, all right, all over Twitter. So, I mean, when you ask, you find that people are more receptive to your social media ministry, where you start talking about Donald Trump. Of course, there's a difference, because the thing is, he's all over Donald Trump balls on Twitter. And he said, yes, I think that's accurate. Yeah, I think it is accurate, because otherwise, you say that you just so happen to tap into a constituency who hate Donald Trump, and they wake up to hate Donald Trump. They eat food so that they'll have energy to hate Donald Trump. They dream about hating Donald Trump in their dreams, and all their whole life falls apart and stuff. Meanwhile, because they can't stop thinking about Donald Trump. That's the type of people is now on Twitter. All right. So the next question is: do you think people in Blue America? And you gotta understand, this whole article is goddamn Twilight Zone. All right, this whole article, because the next question is: do you think people in Blue America are also looking for a religious that they can relate to? In Blue America, I understand that that's terminology, that's jibber jabber that you made up. That's total. I mean, that's a jiggery pokery, honestly. When you think about this, Blue America, what is recognized by NATO or something? Blue America, there's only one Blue America. What is that? It's a crazy, it's an insane question when you think about it. But I'll ask it again. Do you think people are also looking for a religious authority that they can relate to? I don't want to play stupid with y'all. Blue America obviously is talking about Democratic America. All right, when they Blue America, it's funny that they asked the question. In Blue America, as suicidal best and stuff, and they really need to get their stuff together. But yeah, that is the religion that they found. And let's see what Reverend James Martin has to say. Not to put too fine a point on it, that the religious authority that they can relate to is Jesus. He says, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but you might, I don't know, there's a guy named Jesus, and he might, I don't know, if you want to listen to him and stuff. That's what Reverend Jones said. He said, that's the authority that I'm bringing. That, again, it's completely over the top narcissism when you can say toward things. Right? He said, basically, if you want Jesus, I'm the one bringing Jesus, and you better holler. I'm James Martin. He said that when Jesus talks about welcoming the stranger, he couldn't be any clearer. And you understand the complete blasphemies that this guy is saying out of his mouth every other sentence. Alright, I'm going to break this sentence down. Jesus talks about welcoming the stranger. He couldn't be any clearer. Here's the thing. He did. Here's the thing. It can be much clearer if you hear all the other things that he said. Right? Reverend James Martin knows that for a fact, or this story, then, oh man, if you don't welcome a stranger into your house, you're against Jesus and stuff like that, dude. Things were mentioned in the Bible, and this guy's trying to say, basically, you don't want a refugee stuff in your neighborhood and stuff, dude, man. Jesus, no, Jesus and stuff like that. And remember, he said, welcome a stranger. It couldn't be more clear. In fact, it could be more clear. It's called the rest of the Bible, the rest of the story. Reverend James Martin knows that. He's pulling what they would call a fast one back in the day. The next question is this, but totally different interpretation of that, don't they? But case, the parables were interpreted different ways, even in Jesus' time and stuff. Because I remember, because I was looking, he said, "Say this: there are certain stories and passages that are open to interpretation. There are certain stories and passages that are not." Jesus could not be any clearer in Matthew 5, right, where he says, "If you don't welcome the sick, care for the sick, and helping, welcoming, or caring for me," he said, you cannot be any clearer. It could be much, much clearer, and that's what the rest of the Bible does, right? But yet again, just like it always is, going to have a reference. He's going to be quoting one single quote about the Bible and saying, if you don't agree with him, that you're an asshole, basically, and stuff. He's going to say, you know what, you need to take in all the right. Because that's what Vatican says. He says, you know what, you want a wall on your border? That's ridiculous. You're against Jesus. The Vatican has a wall around it, all right? But don't worry about that and stuff. You know, they don't be exactly taking in the poor and stuff. They don't be helping or anything like that. Seems like a big thing. What they like to do is the homosexual orgies with the cocaine and all sort of stuff like that. More power to them, I guess. But this guy, he's harping on the fact that we don't take enough refugees. We don't take enough of these refugees. You know, we don't take enough of these refugees. Guess what? Reverend James Martin has no refugees in his house. And I can promise you that. All right. Now what that means and how that plays out is up for interpretation as far as to whether or not you should let just random people come in to your house and your neighborhood and your communities. The fact that we do need to welcome them and help them and care for them is not up for interpretation. All right. Completely crazy, upside down Twilight Zone logic, right, that he's putting out to you. Because of course the Vatican has all sort of walls around. This James Martin, he lives up in New York. Guess what? He's got a wall around his damn house. I promise you that. He has no refugees living up in his house and stuff like that. He does have a Twitter. He loves to get on it and expose himself all day long for hating Donald Trump, riding his balls, and not only that, for kind of skirting people's attention away from all this pedophilia. That should be number one for him. I mean, this was back in April. I guess he didn't know about the pedophilia back then, but however, the pedophilia is all over the news cycle right now. I'm not sure what James Martin is up to right now, but back in April, he was very much implicating himself, right? He said, I want to be clear about this. Reverend James Martin says this. He says, I want to be clear about this. I'm not a political person. Obviously, you're not. All right? Because he had nothing to say about anybody except for Donald Trump. He says, I'm not a political person, but I do like to weigh in on politics on Twitter. He said, I am very careful about not mentioning even the words Republican or Democrat. He said, I try not to mention names of politicians except for Donald Trump because it gives me followers. He said, because it's wrong for the church to take sides. It's wrong for the church to... the Reverend James Martin said, it's wrong for the church to take sides. The thing is, what I have to explain very slowly to Reverend James Martin is that the church, the whole point of it is to take sides. It's like, dude, someone's just throwing all these lies and absurdities into our face and we're just floating around like, dude, what the hell is going on and stuff. And he's telling us, well, it's wrong for the church to take sides and stuff. You know what? That's the exact purpose of the church. Not only to establish that there's sides, but how to be on the right side and the wrong side. Alright, he says it's wrong for the church to take sides, so I don't bash any Republicans or the Democrats. I do hate Donald Trump, though, you'll notice that, and I ride his balls on Twitter, and I do that for a profession and stuff. Alright, next question is, what about Vatican politics? Alright, all the politics over there in the Vatican. He says you're aligned with Pope Francis. Yeah, I can assure you he is. But even with the Vatican, he has conservative rivals, at least one of whom is said to be close with Steve Bannon. How does that work? And then he answers some more gibberish, dude. I don't even know if I want to read it and stuff. But basically, he's like, man, I don't even think about that. He asked me a different question, basically. And then he said, what's your social media diet like? Do you have any pleasures? I mean, this goes off into weird Twilight Zone land, right? We're in Vanity Fair. Obviously, we're going to find some terrible stuff on there, but asking stupid questions. Can you imagine? We've gotten to the point where a magazine is asking a supposed respectable reverend by the name of James Martin what his social media diet is like, and if he has any guilty pleasures. And that sounds so over the top homosexual that I don't even have time to describe that for you. Alright? The thing is, turns out he does have guilty pleasures. We're talking about a totally bizarre Reverend James Martin who absolutely does have social media guilty pleasures. Alright? He's going to describe them to you. Alright? He said, I follow Elizabeth Windsor, the fake Queen Elizabeth account. Alright? So I don't know how much more homosexual you need to really get sexual deviant and stuff like that. That's what he's doing. That's what someone's reverend is out here doing on Twitter, following a fake Queen Elizabeth Twitter account. And he also said, I also follow Kim Kardashian. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's on Twitter. It's a mix between Kim Kardashian's quotes and an existential philosopher named Soren Kierkegaard. Alright, so how much more bizarre does it get? I don't know. I don't know how much more bizarre that it could get. He loves those two Twitter feeds. It makes him laugh so much. I don't know how much more bizarre it can get, but dude, at the end of this broadcast where we describe that, you know, probably thing is he should be investigated for pedophilia. Thing is, I'll bet every last dollar I have, dude, like, it's no doubt in my mind, and this guy just keeps on going on about just over the top. I mean, dude, not to say anybody's got a problem with it, but it's over the top homosexuality and stuff, and all sort of weird stuff that this guy's involved with. Alright? He's just throwing it on out there. Meanwhile, several months later down the line, we're going to find this Reverend James Martin, right? And we're going to find out that he's been implicated in this stuff, and people are going to look around and be like, oh, how would we ever know? How would we ever know? Even though he's putting it all out in our faces and stuff like that. Alright? So, what would you say to people who have... This is another question that would... I mean, all the questions should probably blow your mind, but this one especially. This one especially because... This question reads, what would you say to people who crisis of faith over the past few months? It's the question. This is what he's asking to the Reverend James Martin, and I'll read it one more time. What would you say to people who have had a crisis of faith over the past few months? Right? And the first sentence of his answer reads this. Well, I would say our faith does not rest on Donald Trump. You might be taken aback by that because the question in and of itself had nothing to do with Donald Trump, right? Of course, it's an interview of a reverend who's swanging to and fro on Donald Trump's balls on Twitter, sure. But the thing is, the question I was asked had nothing to do with Donald Trump, and I'm going to read it one more time. What would you say to people who have had a crisis of faith over the past few months? Question mark. Reverend James Martin said, I would say our faith does not rest on Donald Trump. Whoever said anything about Donald Trump? What? Reverend James Martin just went ahead and he did. He said that anybody on this country, probably on earth, if you have what's called a crisis of faith, it probably had everything to do with Donald Trump. It's an unimaginable hatred. Nobody was even talking about Donald Trump. And he's like, oh, it'll get better. Don't worry, Donald Trump's not going to defeat us. We got to stay united with Shia LaBeouf. And we're going to get through this. It's like, dude, could it be possible that anybody had a crisis of faith and it had absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump? According to Reverend James Martin, no, it could not be possible. And he goes on to say this. He was not nailed to the cross, put in the tomb, and raised from the dead after 3 days. That's the first thing. Focus on this. And he's talking about Donald Trump. I hope he's talking about Donald Trump because he says he was not nailed to the cross, put in the tomb, and raised from the dead after 3 days. That's the first thing. I mean, I don't know which way you can cut that answer. Alright, because it's very bizarre. I don't know how you cut it, but either way you cut it is quite bizarre. When someone asks a priest, hey, anybody's been having a crisis of faith within the past few months, what would you tell him? And he says, don't worry about Donald Trump. Oh, by the way, nobody got nailed to the cross. I'm not sure how he's saying that. Is he saying Donald Trump didn't get nailed? Of course Donald Trump didn't get nailed to the cross. He's still alive. What kind of backwards gibberish is this guy talking about? Alright, this guy is not as retarded as he's leading everybody on to believe that he is so retarded. No, he's very intermixed with this pedophilia thing. He will be implicated before long. That I can assure you. And anybody who, they'll be like, oh man, you probably shouldn't say this about this person. They could get you, if they ever hear about it, get you for slander and libel and stuff like that. I wish he would. Because the thing is, everything he says implicates himself. Alright? Everything that he says, he's going to continue. And, see, if we have enough time, we'll see if we can get to the bottom of this article. He says the second thing is to look at the Easter message. Alright, he says, the question was, if anybody's had a crisis of faith over the past few months, what would you tell them? Reverend James Martin said, oh man, stop worrying so much about Trump. He's trying to get us all. And also, he's not Jesus, but at the same time, none of us are Jesus. So that's kind of an interesting thing to know. It's like, oh, see, Donald Trump isn't Jesus. Kind of find out. He said, the second thing I'll tell these persons, if they had a crisis of faith, the second thing I'll tell them is to look at the Easter message, all right, which is an appropriate thing to talk about this time of year. All right, it gets us lots of money, by the way. All right, so I'll tell them about that. Tell them about the Easter message where they come to our Roman Catholic churches, give us some money, break themselves off some money. I would tell them about that. If they're having a crisis of faith, I'd say, hey, you ever heard about Easter? So you give us some money, baby. That'll fix your crisis. Alright. He says, a sign for us of what God can do. He said, Wait, he said the second thing is the Easter message, which is an appropriate thing to talk about this time of the year as a sign for what God can do. Right? I think the message of Easter is that life is stronger than death. Right? Love is stronger than hatred, and hope is stronger than despair. I mean, basically, just he's going into some sort of semantic liberation and stuff. I really don't know what he's getting at and stuff. Okay, here, let me just go ahead and summarize. Once again, they said, if anybody's having a crisis of faith over the past few months, what we'd tell them, Reverend, and he would say, "Oh man, Donald Trump's out to get us, but don't worry, but Donald Trump's out to get us, and also, he's not Jesus." Just remember that, and also come to church this Easter, and you can give us some money. And that's what he would tell them, basically. That's what he just said he would tell them. He said, "I often invite people to consider the disciples on Good Friday and on Holy Saturday who were terrified, despairing, and cowering behind closed doors because they could see nothing good coming from this." Right? What Easter Sunday shows us is that there are always surprises in store for us, especially if you invite all sort of people with different cultures. Yeah, you're going to find surprises all over the place, I'm sure. And then he says, nothing is impossible with God. Just in case if you didn't know, Reverend James Martin, just to let you know, nothing's impossible with God. All right? And shoot, gosh, this article, I think it's finishing up pretty soon, says, "I often say to people who thought that the church could never change, that the way the church was run would always be the same. Look at Pope Francis. How can you doubt that the Holy Spirit is at work in a powerful way?" Yeah, I'm sure it is, James Martin. All right. Finally, one of the missing links in a fight to prevent abuse. All right. Holding bishops accountable for negligence. Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it, James Martin on your Twitter. He said, "I thought St. John Paul and Pope Benedict were excellent popes. Just excellent. Pope Francis is doing something new. This is what God does on Easter. God does something surprising. The God of surprises is one of my favorite ways of looking at God. Not the God of the universe, but the God of surprises." Things like that. All right. And shoot, man, there we go. It ends just like that. It was a it was an article that not only is bewildering, is full up of all sort of backwards thinking coming from directly from the mouth of a priest or Reverend James Martin, who absolutely needs to be investigated for pedophilia. All right, because the thing is, although you do not see hard evidence of the pedophilia, you can only imagine as a grown man on Twitter saying he's a man of God. He's looking at all sort of effeminate things on Twitter, laughing about it, hating Donald Trump with a passion in such a way that no human being probably should even be hated upon on the earth, but hating him with an undying, relentless passion. All right. Meanwhile, all sort of people in the Vatican is getting implicated for all sort of pedophilia. Everything that happened in the darkness is going to come to light, and these people, they hate Donald Trump. Right? They hate everything that he has to do with, and it says, if you want Jesus, know that you can only get him through me. I'm Reverend James Martin, all right? And I'm going to just completely disregard most of the Bible. I'll tell you about certain quotes, and after I tell you about those, you're going to want to pay carbon taxes, and you want to get all sort of refugees in your neighborhood. You're going to want that whole class civilizations, all that. You're not going to want any walls or borders or anything like that. But meanwhile, me, Reverend James Martin, I'm going to be in my dang gated up neighborhood and stuff, thinking about how lowly and disgusting y'all animals are and stuff. All right? That's the mentality of a Reverend James Martin, all up on his Twitter and stuff like that. All right? See, what you'll know is all throughout this article, and I'm sure there'll be other articles, I'm sure he's very thirsty for attention. What you're going to know is that it's completely nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. All right, and you might be asking yourself, like we said, how is it that you can get so far in authority, supposed religious authority, while not making sense? It's clear that common sense is not your thing. Alright? That is a bit of a distraction. These people emphatically not making sense. These people who refuse to note that the Vatican and the rest of the Catholic Church in particular has a pedophilia problem and they need to get to the bottom of it. Those who are talking about Donald Trump like he is Satan himself. Those people who are so emphatic all on the Twitter and stuff like that. These people are pedophiles. I can guarantee. You know what? I'll put my bottom dollar on it, right? I'll put everything that I have on it, dude. Alright, come and sue me. The thing is, Reverend James Martin's absolutely a pedophile. And what are we going to do? Wait until we find out of his behavior? You know what I'm saying? Perhaps Reverend James Martin is kind of well known here on the internet. Perhaps he is being investigated. Maybe he should be very worried about a Trump administration. Maybe he should be kind of against Trump so emphatically. Maybe he should be trying to espouse such political ideology that absolutely does not make sense one way or another. It does not line up with Christianity, the Bible, Jesus, so on and so forth. It does not align with any of it. And meanwhile, you don't have to believe what the Bible says or anything like that. That's not the problem. The problem is these people walk around in robes looking like damn perverts under their celibacy type lifestyle. And they walk around purporting to have some sort of religious authority or something like that. Right? I'm here to tell you that they're all pedophiles. Especially a Reverend James Martin. He's putting it out there for everybody to see. Alright? And you know what I'm saying? It is a matter of time. Only time will tell. A few months later, I'm going to show you all the article of how he's absolutely a pedophile. And he needs justice, to be honest with you, sooner than later. Of course, the completely legal way. He needs to be taken to court after being investigated for pedophilia. I promise you, you're going to find it. Reverend James Martin, he has a whole bunch to say. He has a whole bunch to say, and ain't none of it good, especially about Donald Trump, even though he owes his entire popularity to Donald Trump, from swinging from Donald Trump's balls off of Twitter. Alright? Absolutely a pedophile, dude. I put everything on it. And you know what? We're going to have more situations. In fact, we're just going to be making a list. Go ahead and making a list of all these pedophile people up in the Catholic Church and stuff, because the thing is, it's a lot of them. Alright? And we're going through a divide. Alright? A global divide. It's called the tribulation and stuff like that. It's definitely happening up in the Catholic Church and stuff. We're definitely going to find out who's the pedophiles. Reverend James Martin definitely needs to be worried about that sort of a thing. Alright? Because I'm on to Reverend James Martin. And anyways, it's only a matter of time before all these people get the notoriety that they deserve of being absolute scum of the earth type individuals that we'll pretty much make obsolete and stuff and forget all their names because they're wretched human beings. These people who mess with children, dude, and nobody here has tolerance for that sort of a thing, and we're not really debating it no more and stuff like that. There will be no exceptions for the pedophilia, for the Todd Nickersons and all that sort of thing out there. There will be no exceptions for Reverend James Martin. There will be no acceptance even for this Pope out here, Pope Francis and stuff. He's trying to get all his pedophile buddies out of harm's way. He's doing that currently. No, in the end, there won't be no acceptance for none of those people and stuff, and we'll have them all called out. We'll know all their names. We'll know who they are and what they look like. And, anyways, tribulation. I'll have to holler at y'all later. We spent enough time here. Next time, you know what I'm saying, we'll have somebody else to look at who's pretty much making it obvious that they're, all sort of perverts. Anyways, it's July the 14th, 2017, and I'll holler at y'all later.